Hi guys, it's Ben here. Welcome back to another Scared Equine video blog. In today's video blog, I'm going to be talking about how to overcome self-doubt. I think self-doubt is something that is part of the human experience. There's nobody, literally nobody out there that doesn't experience at some point self-doubt in their life. It's just something that we all have to embrace as part of our experience. But I think there are some really significant key factors that we can understand about how the mechanism of self-doubt works. And there's some things that I've learned from my mentors and people that I work with over the years that have been really helpful in my understanding of how self-doubt works, because for a big part of my life and in certain stages of my life, I definitely experienced a lot of self-doubt over different things. One of the big things for me was getting up and speaking publicly, like public speaking, getting up in front of people. Doing what I'm doing right now is a real source of intense self-doubt, to the point where I would get cotton candy mouth. I would get so inhibited and my heart would race. And I think that's a common experience for a lot of people, but I wanted to learn about how that mechanism of self-doubt worked and what was going on for me, and how I could empower myself better to have a different response in those situations. So self-doubt is really interesting because a lot of it comes from our comfortable beliefs and habits. Now, if you think about our mind and how our mind works when it comes to patterns and habits, we have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. Okay, now our conscious mind is really the part of our mind that is consciously observing things, looking at things. It observes small bits of information at a time, and it basically is there for us to, if we want to make changes or we want to, it's basically I call it the librarian, and I call the subconscious mind the library. So we have these two mechanisms, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and when we have a very consolidated habit, what happens is it's a subconscious program. So now, because we've accepted it consciously so much, or even unconsciously we've accepted it, it becomes a very strong program that is inbuilt into who we are. And this program, it may be a program that doesn't really ultimately serve our higher purpose. And so what happens is it'll cause us a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of emotional discomfort, and we hang on to this pattern because it feels familiar, it feels safe, and it feels comfortable. Even though it's causing us a lot of suffering, it still is familiar. It's something that we feel more safe and comfortable with than something new or different. And part of this mechanism too is our fight or flight response. So when we were back in the caveman days, we had these instinctive responses that essentially would keep us alive in situations where we were facing predators that were extremely dangerous, so like saber-toothed tigers and things like that. So our need for safety and certainty and what is familiar was a very important honing mechanism to keep us safe. So when it comes to habits and patterns, when we do something that goes against our subconscious programming, the things that are so hardwired into who we are, we feel this inertia and this resistance, and it comes a lot from that flight mechanism. That flight mechanism comes into play. So we feel the fear of that, the vulnerability of that, the uncertainty of that, and that uncertainty is what drives us to want to stay where we are and stay with what is safe, what is familiar, and what is comfortable. And so this again creates that loop. We want to step out, we want to change some habits, some beliefs, or some behaviors or some things that we're doing, but we keep feeling like when we step out in that vulnerable space, we feel the fear, it's intense, it's strong, and it sometimes overrides our desire to make the change. So we fall back into what we're comfortable with, what is easy, what is familiar, what is safe. And this cycle perpetuates and keeps going, and until we get to a point where the pain and suffering that we're experiencing is so much that we feel it's absolutely necessary for us to make that change. But when we understand how this works, then we can learn to lean into the discomfort of that fear of when we're making the change. And see, this is where the self-doubt comes in, because the self-doubt has a lot to do with that fear that we experience and that vulnerability we experience when we're out of our comfort zone, where we're trying to change a program or a pattern or a behavior that is so ingrained, that is so familiar and comfortable for us, that when we step out of it, we feel that fear, and that fear is what feeds into that sense of self-doubt, that sense of I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough, and that uncertainty that we feel. And so if we can't understand what's actually happening, it makes it hard to consciously lean into that and understand this is a normal feeling when we lean into things that are programs that are different to the programs that we're used to. So by leaning into it, that is what is going to essentially allow us to make that change. And eventually what was uncomfortable becomes more and more comfortable as we get in the habit and we habituate that new pattern or program that we've got. And the self-doubt will then diminish as we get more comfortable with that new pattern. And again, it takes a certain amount of time for the brain to re-hardwire, to reset its thermostat. And so that period of transition, it's always going to feel a little bit awkward, uncomfortable, and less so as we do it more. But eventually that new program, when we do it enough and we repeat, it becomes automatic, and so it becomes much more natural, and it starts to feel like the new place where we feel safe and we feel comfortable. So really the goal is to learn to become comfortable being uncomfortable. So having the courage to lean into that fear, that discomfort, that vulnerability of making that change, and again, that is going to help you overcome that self-doubt. And that self-doubt is going to diminish, because as we understand why it's there and what purpose it's playing, we can appreciate it and say, hey, thank you for pointing out to me that this is new and different and uncertain, that there is a risk in this, but I know, I understand what I'm doing, and I'm doing this because this is my heart's desire. This is what I want to do. This is important to me. This is what I love doing. And so again, having that vision and that understanding of why we're wanting to make this change, having a really good reason why, is also going to help with that self-doubt, because if we don't have a good enough reason to move through that discomfort, we're not going to do it. We're simply just going to go back into what we feel is comfortable. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of how this whole mechanism of self-doubt works, how to overcome it. But I think for me, the biggest thing was just understanding how self-doubt works. And that really got me into this mindset of knowing and being conscious about the steps that are involved in making this change. And that allowed me then to have more acceptance of those feelings of vulnerability and move into it with more confidence and lean into that. And that was a huge turning point for me in my life. Being able to get up there and talk in front of big groups of people publicly, and to do it to a point where I started to feel really confident, and I was able to really connect with the people that I was talking to, and to feel inspired about it. That was a very different and new feeling to me, but that was on the other side of the fear. So when I leaned into it enough, over enough period of time, and I kept practicing and working on it, I started to feel what was on the other side of that fear, and that was such a magical thing for me, and I appreciate it really on a really deep level. And that's something that's I've taken forward into all the things that I do in my life. So I hope that you can get the same benefits from that understanding in your life. And again, I want you to please, share your story of you leaning into your fears and your stories of self-doubt, and how transcending that helped you. I'd love to hear more about that. And please like and share this video, and I will see you in the next video.